Sometimes the most dangerous killers aren't hiding in the dark. They're the ones smiling in family photos, kissing you goodnight, holding your baby in their arms. This is the story of a man who fooled his friends, fooled the police, fooled the media, and almost fooled the FBI. Her name was Caroline Crouch. She was smart, she was young, and like a lot of teenage girls, she believed in the idea of forever. She thought she had found it with a man who promised her safety, love, and a beautiful future. At 15 years old, Caroline met a charming, wealthy 27-year-old helicopter pilot named Babis. He literally flew over her school to impress her. He called her his soulmate. He told her they were meant to be. She believed him. They ran away together. They got married. They had a baby. They started building a dream house. On Instagram, they looked perfect. But behind the filters, behind the smiles, something else was happening. On May 11th, 2021, a frantic call to emergency services in Greece reported a violent home invasion. Masked robbers, guns, a break-in, a ransacked house, and a young mother killed. The husband said, "We were attacked. They killed my wife. The media called it savage. The police called it organized. The public called it heartbreaking. But the truth was worse than anyone imagined." Subscriber The Guilty Crime Stories. Caroline Crouch grew up surrounded by the gentle rhythm of island life. Born in Athens in 2001 to a British father and a Filipina mother, she spent her childhood on the small, peaceful island of Anagnostopoulos, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. She loved the sea, swimming, and scuba diving. She dreamed of becoming a psychologist. By all accounts, Caroline was bright, independent, and full of life. But her story took a turn when she met him. It was Easter, 2017. Caroline was just 15. During a Good Friday parade, she saw a man nearly twice her age, confident, handsome, and successful. His name was Anagnostopoulos, but everyone called him Babis. He was a commercial helicopter pilot. He lived a life of luxury, nice cars, designer watches, expensive dinners, and when he wanted something, he got it. One day, he literally flew his helicopter over Caroline's school to impress her, and for a young girl who dreamed of romance, it felt like something straight out of a movie. Soon after, the two began seeing each other secretly. He promised her the world, love, adventure, a life far from the ordinary. And in her teenage innocence, she believed him. As months turned into years, the relationship deepened. Despite the huge age gap, Babis convinced Caroline's family he truly loved her. He proposed, and in 2019, when she was 18, they eloped, marrying in Portugal away from family and friends. It seemed like the perfect love story. A pilot and his young bride, traveling the world, posting smiling photos, celebrating milestones. When they returned to Greece, they rented a beautiful 2-story home in Glikonera, an upscale suburb of Athens. And when Caroline gave birth to their daughter in 2020, the fairy tale felt complete. They had everything: a loving marriage, a beautiful baby, and plans for a dream home on land they had just bought together. To the outside world, they were the picture of happiness. Their Instagram posts told a story of luxury, love, and family. But as it often happens in stories like this, the pictures lied. Behind closed doors, friends began to notice small signs, things that didn't quite add up. Caroline had stopped posting as much online. She grew quieter, more withdrawn, and though she smiled in photos, her eyes told a different story. Babis had started showing controlling behavior. He wanted to know where she was, who she talked to, what she did. He called it protecting her. She called it love. But in reality, it was control. He isolated her from her friends, handled all the finances, and even discouraged her from seeing her own family. Caroline, still a teenager and a new mother, was slowly losing her independence, piece by piece. In her diary, she would later write about wanting to leave him. She said she still loved Babis, but the relationship hurt too much. Her words painted a silent picture of emotional suffocation. of a young woman trapped in what everyone else saw as a fairy tale. By May 2021, Caroline and Babis seemed to have everything a young couple could dream of. A baby, a new home, a future ahead. But under the surface, the cracks had become fractures, and within days, the picture-perfect life they built would shatter forever. Next, the night that fooled the world. It was the early morning hours of Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. In the peaceful Athens suburb of Glyka Nera, everything was silent, except for what was about to become one of Greece's most shocking crime scenes. Inside a two-story home, 33-year-old pilot Babis Anagnostopoulos and his 20-year-old wife Caroline Crouch slept beside their 11-month-old baby. At least, that's how the story began. According to Babis, at around 4:30 a.m., he was jolted awake by the sound of footsteps. Before he could move, 3 men, masked, armed, and ruthless, burst into the room. They tied his hands, covered his eyes and mouth with duct tape, and demanded money. Caroline screamed as one of the intruders threatened to kill their baby if they didn't cooperate. The intruders, speaking in Greek and Albanian accents, kept shouting one question over and over again: "Where's the money?" Babis claimed that in fear for their lives, he told them exactly where it was, inside a Monopoly board game box hidden in a drawer. The men allegedly took the cash, around $10,000, and began tearing through the house, grabbing jewelry and valuables. But even after taking the money, they didn't leave. What happened next was pure horror. According to Babis, the men turned violent. They strangled the family's puppy, Roxy, using her own leash, and hung her body from the staircase banister. Then they turned on Caroline. He said she tried to fight back, but one of them pressed a pillow over her face while another held her down. She struggled, kicked, clawed, and then fell silent. The attack lasted nearly 6 minutes. When it was over, Caroline was dead. Their baby girl was found crying beside her mother's body. Babis, still bound, told police he drifted in and out of consciousness, the rope around his neck cutting off his breath. When he finally woke up, he realized the men were gone. He wriggled over to his phone and, according to his own account, used his nose to dial emergency services. At 6:05 a.m., he managed to place the call. His voice was barely audible through the duct tape, muffled, broken. He gasped out the words, "Robbers. They killed my wife." When first responders arrived, they were met with a scene straight out of a nightmare. The entire living room was ransacked, drawers open, clothes and belongings scattered everywhere. The Monopoly box was on the floor, empty. The security camera was ripped from the wall, its memory card missing, and on the staircase, Roxy's lifeless body hung. Upstairs, they found Babis tied and blindfolded on the bedroom floor, and just a few feet away, Caroline, face down on the bed, motionless. Their baby was sitting beside her, crying, trying to wake her up. Caroline was pronounced dead at the scene. Babis, shaking and tearful, told officers everything. He said 4 men were involved, 3 who entered, 1 who kept watch outside. He described them as tall, dark-skinned, speaking broken Greek. The police initially believed him. After all, the evidence looked real. The mess, the missing money, the dead dog, the broken security camera. The story spread like wildfire across Greece. Headlines called it a brutal home invasion. TV anchors showed Babis cradling his baby, crying at his wife's funeral. He became a national symbol of a grieving husband and father, a victim of unimaginable tragedy. A 20-year-old British woman murdered in her home. Police say professional robbers are behind the attack. The Greek Prime Minister himself called the crime a barbaric. The president of Greece offered condolences, and the media couldn't get enough of the young widowmaker's tears. But behind the scenes, investigators were uneasy. Something wasn't adding up. For one, despite the supposed chaos, no fingerprints or DNA were found anywhere. No signs of forced entry, and the couple's high-tech security system had been tampered with before the crime occurred. Still, the police kept looking outward. Believing this was the work of organized foreign criminals, they even linked the crime to a Georgian gang known for violent break-ins. A suspect was arrested near the Bulgarian border, a man named Georgi Haradishvili, found with a fake passport. He had a criminal record for home robberies, and his face vaguely matched the sketch Babis described. Police interrogated him for days, but nothing stuck. He denied ever being near the house, and soon the evidence against him fell apart. The officers were forced to release him, and as the investigation dragged on, Athens grew restless. Who could commit something this cruel? Who could kill a young mother in front of her child and leave without a trace? At Caroline's funeral, Babis wept publicly. He told reporters, "I was so lucky to have loved her. So lucky she loved me. My daughter will grow up not remembering her mother." The world mourned with him. He played the role perfectly, a devastated husband, desperate for justice. But while he spoke of love, detectives were quietly piecing together the truth, because something in Babis's story, his timing, his tears, his version of the break-in, wasn't making sense. And soon, the evidence would reveal that the monster who killed Caroline wasn't an intruder at all. At first, everyone believed him the grieving husband, the widowed father, the survivor of a brutal home invasion. For weeks, the Greek public rallied around Babis Anagnostopoulos. His photos were everywhere, hugging his baby, crying at memorials, thanking police for their efforts. He gave interviews, spoke gently about Caroline, and even appeared calm, collected, and articulate. The perfect image of a man broken by tragedy, yet holding himself together for his daughter. But behind closed doors, the detectives weren't convinced. The story was too clean, too cinematic. The professional robbers had somehow managed to erase all evidence. No DNA, no fingerprints, no shoe prints, not even a single hair. And for a crime scene supposedly filled with chaos, nothing truly valuable had been taken. Except the story itself. Detectives began to re-examine every detail of the night Caroline was killed. They looked at timelines, phone data, surveillance cameras, and behavioral patterns. The more they looked, the stranger it got. According to Babis, the robbers broke in through the basement window. But when investigators measured that window, they realized something obvious. It was far too small for an adult man to fit through. So if the intruders hadn't come from there, how did they enter? They hadn't. Then came the security camera. Babis had told officers the robbers ripped the camera from the wall and took the memory card during the break-in. But the forensic data showed the card had been removed at 1:20 a.m., 3 hours before the supposed attack, meaning whoever removed it knew exactly what was coming. Meanwhile, media frenzy was reaching new heights. The story dominated every headline in Greece. Talk shows, tabloids, primetime news. Greek mother killed by masked robbers. Baby watches as mother murdered in her sleep. Reporters camped outside the house for days, desperate for a glimpse of the hero husband. And Babis played the part perfectly. "I did everything I could to protect my family," he said, holding back tears. "They took my wife, but I'll raise my daughter to know how strong her mother was." He seemed so believable that even seasoned journalists praised his composure. But the detectives noticed something. He was too composed. The grief looked practiced. The tears came on cue. Then came the breakthrough. One of Caroline's close friends handed police a text message, one sent from Caroline's phone just hours before her death. The message read,
"I can't take it anymore.
I'm leaving him." That one line changed everything. Investigators discovered that Caroline had tried to book a hotel for herself and her daughter the same night she was murdered. They also retrieved her smartwatch, a simple fitness tracker that recorded her heart rate and movement. The data was damning. At 3:58 a.m., Caroline's pulse was steady. She was asleep. At 4:05 a.m., her heart rate spiked dramatically, showing signs of intense stress, fighting, panic, adrenaline. By 4:11 a.m., her heart stopped completely, but Babis had told police the robbers broke in around 4:30 a.m. Caroline was already dead nearly. 20 minutes before his story even began, that's when investigators decided to check his own phone data. The findings were surreal. Babis claimed he'd been tied up and immobilized during the attack, but his fitness app showed he was walking around the house for several minutes during that same time. The husband, who couldn't move, had been moving all along. Even stranger, the security system's SD card had been removed earlier, exactly matching the time when Babis was still awake and active. The detectives now knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a break-in, this was a setup. Still, they needed to be sure, so they decided to stage a small test. They asked officers to try and replicate how Babis claimed he used his nose to dial emergency services while tied up. No one could do it. Not one officer managed to unlock a phone, open the dialer, and place a call with their nose through duct tape. The story was falling apart fast. And so, on June 17th, 37 days after Caroline's murder, police made their move. A small memorial service was being held for Caroline on her home island of Anagnostopoulos. Babis attended, carrying his daughter, hugging Caroline's mother, crying in front of cameras. As mourners gathered to pay respects, plain-clothes detectives approached quietly. They waited until the service ended, then told him they needed him for a new line of questioning, that they had identified a suspect. Babis nodded, calm as ever, and agreed to go. But what he didn't know was that he was the suspect. When he arrived at Athens police headquarters, investigators presented him with the full evidence timeline, the smartwatch data, the missing SD card, the phone movement, the false break-in details. The interrogation lasted 8 hours. At first, he maintained the lie. Then the questions started hitting too close. The gaps in his story grew wider, and finally, Babis broke down. He confessed. He told officers he and Caroline had argued the night before. She had threatened to take their daughter and leave him. In a fit of rage, he pinned her down and smothered her with a pillow. She fought back, but he didn't stop. When she stopped breathing, he realized what he'd done. Then came the chilling part. Instead of calling for help, he spent hours staging the scene, killing their puppy to make the robbery look real, tearing up the house, removing the security card, tying himself up, and finally placing the fake emergency call. And for more than a month, he lived freely, attending memorials, giving interviews, and holding the baby of the woman he'd murdered. When his confession broke, the story exploded. TV anchors who once praised him now called him the monster husband. Newspapers called it the murder that fooled the world. And people across Greece felt a single, unified emotion: betrayal. Because the man who had fooled everyone, the man who faked his tears on camera, wasn't just the killer. He was her husband. Next, the confession details, the court trial, and the chilling aftermath of the crime that made the world question how far a man will go to protect his lies. On June 17, 2021, 37 days after Caroline Crouch was murdered, the investigation reached its breaking point. Detectives had spent weeks chasing dead ends, robbers, gangs, foreign criminals, until all the evidence began pointing to one man, not a stranger, not an intruder, but the husband. When Babis Anagnostopoulos arrived at the Athens police headquarters, he believed he was helping identify a suspect. He smiled, spoke calmly, even thanked the officers for finally finding the killer. But what he didn't know was that he was the man they had been hunting all along. Inside the interrogation room, investigators laid the evidence on the table. First, Caroline's smartwatch, showing her heart stopped at 4:11 a.m. Then, the missing SD card from the security camera, removed hours before the supposed break-in. And finally, his own phone data, proving he was moving around during the time he claimed to be tied up. The timeline was airtight. The alibi was gone. At first, Babis stayed composed. He crossed his arms, shook his head, and repeated the same story he'd told for over a month. It was the robbers. They came in, they killed her, I tried to save her, but detectives kept pressing. Minute by minute, hour by hour, the truth began to crumble. He was shown the data again. Explain this, they said. How were you moving around if you were tied? Why was the camera turned off before the break-in? And why was Caroline's heart already stopped before you called for help? The questions grew louder, his answers grew weaker, and finally something in him broke. After 8 long hours, Babis confessed. He said it started with an argument. Caroline had been angry, tired of his control, his jealousy, his manipulation. She wanted to leave. She wanted to take their baby and go. According to him, that was the moment he lost control. He told police. She threw the baby in the crib. She told me to get out. She hit me. I panicked. He claimed it wasn't planned. He claimed it was a moment of madness, but the evidence told a different story. Babis pinned Caroline down on the bed, used his full body weight, and pressed a pillow over her face. She struggled for 6 minutes, clawing, kicking, gasping for air. When it was over, she was gone. The silence that followed wasn't remorse. It was calculation. Instead of calling an ambulance, Babis began staging the scene. He took out the memory card from the security camera. He killed their puppy, Roxy, strangled her with her own leash, then hung her from the staircase. He ransacked drawers, scattered jewelry, and overturned furniture. He tied his own hands and feet, wrapped duct tape around his face, and waited for dawn. Then he pressed his phone with his nose to call police, just as he had practiced. When officers arrived, he acted the part flawlessly, panicked, shaking, crying for help. He told them 3 men broke in. He hugged his baby and whispered to the cameras that he would make sure Caroline's killers paid. And for 37 days, everyone believed him. But in that interrogation room, under the weight of undeniable evidence, he finally admitted the truth. He told investigators, "Yes, I killed her. I deserved to be punished." Yet even then, he couldn't stop lying. He tried to twist the story, saying Caroline had provoked him, that she pushed and hit him first, that he just wanted to stop her. He called it a tragic accident, but there was nothing accidental about what came next. The planning, the cleanup, the manipulation. He didn't just kill his wife, he fooled an entire nation. He smiled through interviews, hugged her mother and posed with their baby, while knowing the truth for over a month. Caroline's parents believed their son-in-law was a hero. Her friends comforted him. The media praised his courage, and through it all, he stayed calm because he thought he'd gotten away with it. But now, the mask was gone. The charming pilot, the perfect husband, the grieving father, was exposed as a cold-blooded killer. When news of his confession broke, Greece was stunned. People cried in disbelief. Reporters, who once called him a victim, now called him the man who fooled the world. Social media erupted in outrage and sorrow, because the truth was far darker than anyone imagined. Caroline wasn't killed by robbers or by chance. She was killed by the man who promised to love and protect her forever. And even when justice caught up to him, Babis still tried to justify it. He told police, "I panicked. I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to stop." But deep down, everyone knew this wasn't panic. This was control. This was ego. This was murder. When the news of Babis Anagnostopoulos' confession broke, Greece stopped. The man who had played the role of the grieving husband for over a month was now revealed to be the killer. It wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a betrayal of humanity. For Caroline's parents, David and Susan Crouch, the confession shattered whatever peace they had left. They had comforted him, trusted him, even held him as he cried at their daughter's funeral. Now, they had to face the truth. The man they welcomed into their family was the same man who had taken their child's life. Visual, real-life clips of courtroom, Caroline's photo on the screen, flickering candles. The trial began in May 2022 at the Athens Mixed Jury Court. The world watched closely as the details of the case resurfaced. The staged break-in, the lies, the manipulation. Prosecutors called it a crime of cruelty and calculation. In court, Babis wore a suit and a calm expression, just as he always had. He admitted to the killing, but still tried to soften the story, claiming it was a crime of passion. He said he lost control during an argument. But forensic experts destroyed that narrative. Caroline's smartwatch data proved that she suffered for 6 long minutes before dying. That wasn't passion. That was torture. The prosecution described Babis as narcissistic, controlling, and dangerous. They argued that his actions after the murder, killing the dog, tying himself up, lying to the police, deceiving the public, all pointed to a premeditated cover-up. In his defense, Babis looked down often, pretending to weep, but the court had heard enough. After months of hearings, witness statements, and evidence review, the verdict was unanimous. Babis Anagnostopoulos was found guilty of premeditated murder, animal cruelty, falsifying evidence, and misleading authorities. His sentence, life imprisonment plus 10 years. As the verdict was read, Caroline's father sat silently in the courtroom, tears filling his eyes. Her mother held a photo of Caroline as a child, smiling, carefree, innocent. The man who once flew helicopters for a living would now spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. But even behind bars, Babis continued to manipulate. He gave interviews claiming he regretted what he did, insisting he still loved Caroline. It was the same performance he had perfected, the calm, articulate, sorrowful mask that once fooled the world. Yet this time, no one believed him. Caroline's parents took custody of their granddaughter, the baby who had once been left beside her mother's body. They returned to the quiet island of Anagnostopoulos, determined to raise her surrounded by love and truth. David Crouch later told reporters, "My daughter's gone, but her spirit will live through her child. And that's what we must protect now." He also fought to ensure that Caroline's daughter would never have to carry her father's surname, removing every legal tie to the man who destroyed their family. In Greece, the case led to nationwide conversations about domestic violence, emotional control, and the dangers of coercive relationships. It became a symbol, a warning about how manipulation can disguise itself as love. The media called it the murder that fooled the world. But to those who truly knew Caroline, it was never about the headlines. It was about a young woman full of life and promise, trapped in the illusion of a perfect marriage. The trial brought justice, but not closure, because no verdict, no sentence, no punishment could undo the 6 minutes that stole Caroline's future. As the courtroom emptied, one of the prosecutors summed it up best. He didn't just murder his wife. He murdered the idea of trust. Today, Caroline's grave overlooks the sea she loved so much. Her daughter visits sometimes, and too young to understand what happened, but old enough to feel the love that surrounds her. And as the waves crash gently along the shore, there's a silence, the kind that reminds you that even the most beautiful stories can hide the darkest truths. Caroline Crouch's story isn't just another tragic headline, it's a reminder, a painful one, of how easily love can be manipulated and how control can disguise itself as care. From the outside, Babis and Caroline looked like a dream couple, a pilot, a young wife, a beautiful baby. They smiled for the camera, traveled together, posted their happiness online. But behind those smiles was isolation, fear, and silence. Caroline's death forced an entire nation to face a truth too many ignore, that abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with soft words, hidden rules, and a slow erasure of someone's freedom. In the years since her murder, Greece has passed stronger domestic violence laws, and Caroline's name has become a symbol, a warning, and a voice for others who can't speak. Her parents continue to raise her daughter, making sure she grows up knowing the truth, not the lies, and maybe that's the only kind of justice that truly matters, the truth, because at its core, this story isn't about a murderer who fooled the world. It's about a young woman who deserved better, and a world that must learn to listen sooner. If you or someone you know feels trapped, scared or silenced, please reach out for help. There are people who will believe you. You are not alone, and you do not have to wait until it's too late. This was the husband who fooled everyone. Even the FBI. Thank you for watching the Guilty Crime Stories. If this story moved you, please like, share and subscribe, not just to support the channel, but to help spread awareness, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is tell the truth.